if you're enjoying the podcast episodes on Shannon Confidential, go ahead and click subscribe. Thank you so much for your support. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Forensic Friday. I am Shannon, your host. And with us this evening is Harlot Lacow. She is our forensic scientist and our professor and my co-host. Glad to have you, Harlot.
Hi, how are you, everyone?
We are so excited to bring this episode to you tonight. We're very sorry that Bertha is not able to be with us tonight due to a scheduling conflict. She's out there solving crimes and cold cases. So she will be with us next time. We have a wonderful, wonderful guest coming next week. So we can't wait for you to tune in. But tonight we are going to do part 3 of the Stephen Smith investigation. And with Harlot here with us as our forensic scientist, I couldn't think of a better person to have on this specific episode because we're going to go into the evidence, the collection of evidence, what they did collect, what they may have missed, and what may still be available on the evidence they did collect, if in fact it was collected appropriately. And there's a lot to be said about a lot of parts of this investigation. So, Harlot, I know you've been biting at the bit. You have talked about this evidence, since we first learned about this case. So let's just start from the arrival on the scene. The first bit of evidence that should be collected, not going through processes, securing the scene, things like that, but you start collecting evidence immediately, visually, and that could also be, and very importantly, your photography.
Yeah, the first part of the crime scene process is actually the documentation of the scene, right?
Yes,
we have very fragile evidence that might be lost, because of weather conditions or because of the evidence itself. Those might need to be collected immediately, so they need to be photographed and documented.
And some examples of the things that need to be absolutely documented right away due to weather conditions, other investigators, other officers, people in the area, that's why you've secured off immediately. But give examples of some of the things that need to really be collected right away.
So I would say probably trace evidence.
And for someone that doesn't know what that is, what would trace evidence be?
Trace evidence it's a very small evidence. So it could be, for example, hair, fibers, okay? So those are at the risk of getting lost easily, okay?
Would a footprint, a shoe print, a tire print, would that be trace evidence or?
No, those are not considered trace evidence.
Trace would be something small.
Yeah, unless they're gonna get disturbed. I don't know, if you see that raining is coming and there is a foot impression there and you need to cast that impression, you probably will do it before it starts raining, of course. So you can preserve that evidence. So you will photograph the evidence and do the casting and collect it.
And part of
collecting, if it's not compromise it, you can wait. But for example, fibers, hair, sometimes like a very small evidence that can be lost easily, that one should be collected immediately.
And would trace evidence be something they could find underneath fingernails?
Yes, trace evidence can be found under the fingernails.
And what if, when they say they collect trace evidence under, they clip the nails, they bag the hands, what is it that could possibly be under there?
It could be, sometimes it could be, for example, if it's a violent incident or the person or the victim was trying to defend himself or herself, he or she can get some, let's say, like skin cells from the assailant under their nails, or blood, okay? Or if they were in contact with any other type of material or something that got into their nails, that can link that victim to an object or to a person or a place, that can be found there. But usually you will find, when the person tried to defend himself or herself from the assailant, you might find tissue from the assailant, or sometimes hair from the assailant
Okay.
in their victim's hand. Okay, but I mean the hands are also bagged in case of gunshot residue. It's a way to preserve that type of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So hands
And
will be bagged in those cases to where they suspect that there was or the gunshot residue can be found on the victim's hand.
okay. And when so much has changed on the collection of DNA, we've been able to get, the smallest amount of skin cells or blood has been, we can now collect DNA samples, or a good enough DNA sample, from much smaller amounts. What is the amount needed to collect a full DNA profile?
It would depend, but just a few cells sometimes can give a DNA profile.
And that's like the top of a pin.
Yes.
And I know we've also talked about the MBAC, where it's a vacuum, where you could vacuum off like the seats of a car if your car was stolen. And there's DNA evidence that could be collected that you can't even see with the naked eye, just through that, correct?
Yes, like with the MBAC, there are some areas or surfaces that can be vacuumed. So if any DNA was left there, usually those are epithelial cells, mostly, because we shed those cells, and the DNA is found in the cells,
Okay.
of the cells. So that instrument will collect those cells, and it has it goes through a process where the cells get deposited on a filter, and that's what gets analyzed later on.
Okay.
So it's useful in certain cases and type of surfaces.
Okay. When you say surfaces, what kind of surfaces?
It could be clothes, okay. It can be, for example, mostly on evidence that you probably won't find anything when you swab them. You will use the vacuum, okay. But it's been from rocks. The analysts have been able to get a DNA profile from a rock, okay.
That's incredible.
And from some objects too, and clothes. So
Okay. So going back,
for example, like a hat, a pair of pants, or a shirt. So if someone was in contact with that piece of cloth, uh, those cells might be recovered from there.
transferred onto those objects. All right. So going to the Stephen Smith case, and after we've looked through the crime scene photos, I believe, it's in my opinion, that there weren't nearly enough taken. Yes, we have documentation of where Stephen was in the road. We've got that. But what I'm concerned is what's lacking. I think the quality of some of the photos are questionable. If they're not even clear, it's very, very hard to, those are going to be the only way to document that scene. And if you can't zoom in and look and see and really get a full overview, the story of the crime scene, that part of the evidence is lacking. And yes, though we saw many, many photos of Stephen, it was, in my opinion, lacking the area where he may or may not have been walking on the side of the road, both sides of the road, the ground surrounding him. Besides for someone saying, okay, I'm going to photograph the body and where he's laying, I don't think that they went close enough or in detail enough surrounding him. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think we discussed that in the past as well. The photograph could have been taken better. They could have taken like more photograph, more close-ups. The lighting conditions also, like the or the settings that they used probably when they took the photograph were not the best ones, maybe.
They're very dark or either very overexposed.
Yeah, overexposed or underexposed, and you cannot see much of the detail.
Yeah, there were some injuries that we even looked at, and all three of us looked at it and thought, well, is it this or is it that? But because it wasn't a clear photograph or photographed on multiple angles, it was very, very hard to say, okay, is that injury this or is that injury that? And that's the one thing, if you photograph it well, though you may not be able to show everything that you're trying your best to do, but you should at least be able to understand an injury with multiple angles of the photograph, correct?
Well, I don't know if I understand it, because that's the pathologist. They're actually the one that determines what type of injury it is.
Not determining the type of injury, just seeing the full injury.
Or for seeing it, yes. They should be able to take a good photograph of the injury and close up of the injuries where it can be seen a little bit better.
And
But I'm gonna tell you too. I mean, photography, it's one of the most challenging, I think, skills for a crime scene investigator. It's very difficult sometimes to take those photographs. Okay.
Oh, 100%.
To actually get to the right setting to get what you want to see there, or what you want other people to see.
Which is also why you take multiple in the event.
Yes.
Just that one photograph did not come out, or it was overexposed or underexposed or maybe slightly blurry, to take multiple to up the percentage of good quality photographs of a crime scene.
Yeah, it's better to take more than just a few, just in case.
Correct. And
also to take them under different conditions, like light conditions. You can do like a bracketing, so you put them in different at the different settings, so you can see different details.
Correct. And one of the things with Stephen's case that they said, well, maybe he was walking home because his car allegedly ran out of gas or stopped running for whatever reason. I think it's kind of strange that they didn't even, at least in the report, and certainly not in any photos, they never photographed the walkway, the grass or the sand or anything on the side of the road to even check. To just say he was walking home, and he wouldn't have walked down the middle of the road because it was in the middle of the night. In the report, checking, footprints or shoe prints of any kind, there's absolutely zero mention of that.
Yeah, they haven't mentioned if they actually went through that pathway that he did, like from the car to where he was found. I don't even know if that none of the reports state that they actually look into all that area, like from the car to where he was found.
Correct. So to me,
search the area where Stephen was found, and then they went into the car.
Yeah. And there's no photographs surrounding Stephen close up to say there could have been blood spatter from getting hit with something, or if this was done intentionally. If that person or persons was injured, would they have any evidence in the surrounding area around Stephen? And that's the part where I think they missed a great opportunity to collect more evidence visually, at the very least visually, because the surrounding area, the road, the grass, where he may or may not have walked, clearly that's not going to be available anymore. But at least it's not even documented.
Yeah, the surrounding is important, and it's important also not only document what you see, but also what you don't see, because when there is something that is not there, you should document it too, because question will come after. Like now, okay, was it blood anywhere else, or was any other like blood stain or any other thing around that they didn't state that in any of the reports, like no other blood stain were found or seen, or so we don't really know because there is no photograph on.
Nothing, nothing. And why is it also very important when you're taking photographs, especially when there's certain injuries on the body or even evidence in the surrounding area that you photograph, that you scale it? Explain the reason why you scale evidence.
When you use, like, when you make the photograph with the scale.
Yes.
To the, well, one of the main purpose of the scale is to, of course, to have a representation of the size of the object, okay, and in impressions like shoe impressions, tire impressions, fingerprints, it's important when they need to print them to one scale, like the real size of the evidence.
So a one-to-one scale, a one-to-one, if you're looking at a photograph of a shoe impression and it is scaled, you could tell by that scale to pretty good certainty, depending on how good the impression is, what size shoe that is.
Yes, and by having the scale there, you're able to print that image with the, let's say if it's a foot impression, with the real size, okay, the real size that the impression was. I mean, when the photograph is taken correctly, okay?
Exactly. So if I took my shoe off right now and I took a photo of it, you could look at that photo, but you would have no idea what size shoe that was. But if I had the scale next to it, and a scale could be something, even if you don't have, a ruler that shows inches and width, even if I took a quarter, everybody knows what the size of a quarter is. If there's anything that could show this is how big this is how big the shoe is, you could then do a one-to-one on that shoe based on what was used as the scale, and immediately know what size shoe I wore.
Yeah, the scales is a reference for that, for the size.
Okay. So, and I bring this up.
Excuse me, Shannon. You can use that. I mean, obviously, if you don't have anything else, but ideally, what you will use, it's like an approved scale. Okay.
Yes.
For taking those photographs.
Okay. Like if Bertha was here, that's part of her crime scene investigator kit, no doubt. She would tell you everything that's in her kit to make sure the collection of evidence is done correctly, from her camera to her what she uses for measurements, for dust. She's got the whole kit. So Bertha, I'm sure if she was here, and we do miss you, Bertha, she'd be going all over this.
Yes. And probably in another episode, we can also cover a little bit more of this, because she's actually expert on that.
Yes, which I'm sure we'll get into. There's no doubt, because there's a lot here. But the reason why I bring up the scale is because, in particular, there was an injury on Stephen. And because this is an open case, I won't go into extreme detail, but there is an injury on Stephen that could be one or more causes could have caused this injury. And if that injury was photographed, it was scaled, it would be a lot easier to then decide what it could or could not be, and what size of what caused that injury could or could not be.
Okay, I might be wrong on this, but I believe that those injuries on the victims or the person, the photograph of those injuries with the scale are done at the ME office.
Okay.
Are done, or the
they may have.
Document. Yeah, they may have taken those photographs. I don't know, but usually they take photographs of those injuries without the scale and with the scale.
Okay, so
when they examine the body there.
Okay. All right. So let's just hope that was done at that time.
I hope so.
We certainly hope so. So then there is, and I do want to take this time to thank those that have responded to me on Reddit, and have also responded to our YouTube videos that we have done on the Stephen Smith investigation. All of you are so smart and your questions are so incredible, so engaging. I have loved every moment speaking with you. And one person asked if there was blood at the evidence, if he was blood at the crime scene, if he was bleeding at the crime scene, he must have been alive at the crime scene. How would you respond to that?
Well, to tell you the truth, I believe that he definitely was bleeding at the crime scene, because that pool of blood that was there, I mean, that might have
Took place there.
Yeah, that took place there. So yeah, he probably was alive at that time. He probably was alive at that time.
And this goes to my next question. Blood spatter tells a lot. Depending on specific injuries, what kind of weapon was used, even how the person moved, or if even the absence of blood is a sign where someone should have been or could have been or what have you. But in specifically to Stephen, he had very, very specific blood spatter around his mouth. And will you describe what that is, the exact name, and how that's caused?
Well, I'm not a blood spatter analyst, but
we're not saying we're doing any of this as a
no, I know. But,
it's just
I mean, those are maybe some conclusions that an expert on that will make. Sometimes when you can see blood stains that they have bubbles on it, that's an expirated pattern. Okay, so that means usually it's because there is some oxygen coming out. It can be from the nose of the person, from the mouth. Okay, so that's when usually you see those bubbles.
Okay, and if
one of the images, it kind of show those.
Yes, which would mean to some degree, and we will never know, because he had such massive head trauma. We do not know to what degree he may have been alive, but we're pretty certain, due to the fact that he was bleeding at the scene and the spatter marks on his mouth, around his mouth, that he was still to some degree alive and to some degree breathing.
Yes, I that's what I believe.
Okay, so a lot of people have written in or made comments wondering if he was killed elsewhere and then just dumped. It's in my personal opinion that no, he was not. Not saying he wasn't injured anywhere else, but he actually bled and was alive at some point on that road, and that's where he took his last breath.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we thought. But yeah, that's something that we can also talk to like a forensic pathologist and see what their opinion could be about that, and maybe they should be able to answer that.
Okay. So is there, and then we can go to the car. Bertha and I addressed that in the past episode, the evidence collection at the car. Again, you can do the shoe prints. You could do all of that at the car, fingerprints, DNA. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I believe so too. If they think that somebody was in contact with that car after he left the car, or maybe while they were during the time that the car was there. I mean, the fact that the gas cap was open and hanging on the side of the car, that's kind of awkward there. I mean, it's if you run out of gas, like you mentioned in the past, there is not much reason to open that.
Yeah, you open the gas cap to either put gas in or take gas out.
Yep.
You don't just open it and walk away.
Yes, that's kind of strange. So if somebody else was in contact with that gas cap, fingerprints could be collected from there. It also can be swabbed for DNA analysis to see if somebody else actually was in contact with the car.
And if that car wasn't stored properly after it was taken, you would lose all of that evidence over time.
No, not necessarily.
If it rained on the car.
Well, if it rains on the car, it could be, yeah. If it rains on I don't know if they have it protected or if they have it like outside.
That's what I'm just saying. If it's stored in, if it's just in a random lot, wide open to the elements all these years.
If it's exposed to the weather conditions, you might lose some of the evidence. But I mean, it's always worth it to try.
It's always worth trying.
Yeah, they're always worth it to try and see if they can obtain something from there.
Okay, so as far as the crime scene, is there?
Excuse me, Shannon. From the inside the car too, but the thing is that the car was found locked. So I don't know if somebody actually was able to get inside the car.
Well, they took photographs. They were able to find his wallet.
Yeah, the law enforcement, yes. But if somebody else like was in contact with the car, no law enforcement, like other people that might be maybe with him at the time, or I don't know, chasing him. We don't know. Some people allege that they might maybe saw him and went after him, but I don't think. I mean, the car was locked, and he has the keys with him.
Okay.
I don't think that nobody actually went inside the car.
Okay. Other than
unless somebody
responders
was inside the car with him when he was driving the car. That's the only that he was driving someone else with him.
Okay.
That evidence might be found inside the car, but if he was alone in the car, nobody was able to get into the car because he had the keys.
Okay.
But yes, somebody might be able to be in touch or touching that gas cap. Okay.
Yeah, if they wanted to make it look like he ran out of gas, yeah.
Yep. If they want to make it look like that, yes.
All right, and there's also another question that I've received in the comments and with all my conversations with all the incredible home investigators on Reddit. When it comes to the chain of custody of evidence, can you explain to everybody? And there's a lot of people who don't understand the full process of collecting evidence and chain of custody. Let's just say right now, this is a pen and it's evidence. Tell our viewers and our listeners, what is the process to collect this and what is the chain of custody and why?
Well, the chain of custody is documentation, okay? It's a document that it proves or shows who has been in contact with the evidence, okay? So everyone that has been handling that evidence should be, his or her name should be in that document, okay?
And part of the collecting is you would put it in a bag, you would seal the bag, you would sign the seal,
yes,
and then document you have it, what time, where you were going.
Yes, some evidence, some packages get sealed at the crime scene. The ones that don't need any processing, like at the agency, and they're going straight to the lab or for analysis, you will seal those. Some other ones you might not seal them there. You just kind of close the bag but don't seal it because you will process them when you get into the agency. You will take more photograph of the item. Remember, when you take the photograph at the scene, you take photograph of the object as you found it. So at the agency later on, you will take more photograph of that evidence when needed, okay? Like from all the sides. So basically that chain of custody starts when you transfer that evidence to somebody.
The moment you move it.
Yeah.
So even if you're not going to seal it, the moment you move it, the moment it's put in the car, crime scene unit takes it.
Collected, that kind of start there because you have the date and the time that you collected and who collected. Okay.
Okay.
From there on, there is the chain of custody document or record the all the person that has been in contact or handling that evidence.
And where?
From crime scene to court. Okay.
I'm so glad you said that. From crime scene to court.
From crime scene to court.
What happens if at any point that chain of custody is broken, meaning they even if it's just for a certain amount of time, there is no documentation on where that evidence is. What happens?
Well, the evidence gets compromised because you don't know what could have happened to that evidence.
Not necessarily it's always compromised due to foul play, but when you don't know, you don't know. And when evidence is compromised, if that chain of custody is compromised, does that then cause a problem if that piece of evidence would be used in court?
Of course, it can be a problem in court.
What is it completely inadmissible?
I guess that it will be case by case, and I don't know if it could be any justification for that chain of custody broken, but the evidence might become inadmissible in court because of that.
So that the collection and the chain of custody of evidence from crime scene to court is crucial.
Yeah, it's critical. Yeah.
And I would imagine pretty much every single agent, investigator, first responder, they all know this.
Yes.
This is like policing 101.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All that information should be recorded there and documented, like the time, the date of the collection or the transfer, and what was the purpose of the transfer.
And definitely who was transferring it.
Yes. From
okay.
whom to whom.
So in collecting evidence, if you are transferring, say, a cell phone, what kind of packaging would you transfer a cell phone in?
Well, there is specific packaging, okay, for cell phones. So they are called Faraday bags, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are one type of bags that they kind of keep the information.
It's almost
like so
the information on that item can't be removed remotely.
Yes, it protects from that.
Okay. And if you were collecting pills, what kind of collection bag would be used for something dry like a pill?
Well, we have envelopes or pill boxes that we can put them in there.
Okay. And what if you were collecting something wet, say a bloody shoe or bloody shirt?
Okay, items that are wet, I mean, it depends on the agency, the protocols, the circumstances of the crime scene, because, I mean, all crime scenes are different. But the best way is to actually let the wet evidence dry before you package it. Okay, everything that has any type of biological fluid and it's wet, it should be dry if possible or when possible, and then packaged in paper bags.
And a paper bag so it could breathe.
It could breathe.
Okay, if it's
yeah, the composition might happen there, and mold can grow on the evidence, and that can affect the DNA analysis, like the PCR.
Okay, but let's say in the event there's a crime scene and it's going to start to pour, you have to collect it. But then when you get it to the lab, or you would then take it out to dry?
Yeah, you will let it dry. And usually agencies, they have dry cabinets that they actually put their evidence there, and they let them dry there. And that's what they use.
Okay, and even something like that would be on the chain of custody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, as soon as you collect it, you record all the information.
Yeah, like you said, from crime scene to court.
Transfer it to the lab or to some or or to property evidence, wherever you transfer it, it should be
Every step of the way.
every step, and every person who handled that evidence.
Okay. So now we've talked about the actual crime scene. Is there any other evidence you believe at the crime scene that could have been collected?
Well, I was concerned about the, of course, the car, the gas cap. I think that something, I mean, that should be swapped for DNA to see if somebody else was in contact with that, like if it was open after he left, or if maybe only his DNA or it's found there. So that might indicate that probably nobody else was in touch with that. It can be also a possibility that there is no DNA there. Okay, that sometimes we don't leave like enough cells that we can get a complete DNA profile. Okay.
Okay.
Even though the contact happened. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's one of the things that I think that it should have been collected at the time.
Especially since they thought at that time it was a homicide.
And also from his clothes, I believe that if there was some type of violence or some type of contact, he was trying to defend himself, or even after the incident happened, if maybe they moved him a little bit, or if somebody like grabbed the body, move it from a little bit, or were in touch with him, I would say that it would be worthy maybe to do maybe use one of those in back to see if there is a DNA
on his.
From other person or other individual.
Now, would that evidence still be there today if it was collected and stored properly? Would that evidence still be on his clothing and his shoes today?
It could be. It could be. It could be.
Okay. And I know you can even get fingerprints off of human skin.
Yes.
Can you tell people, our viewers and our listeners, the process of that?
I don't really know how they actually process those type of prints from the skin. I'm not really. That's not an area that I work with or that I have taught.
But it can be done.
Finger prints, yes, they can leave fingerprints from many different surfaces.
Okay. And so
skin is one of them. I think there was, I believe that there's even a research on that.
Okay.
I know that, for example, for DNA analysis, I was actually on a workshop recently about the MBAC.
Mm-hmm.
They were actually mentioning that they're being able to collect DNA from the skin of an individual, like from another person that was in contact with that person, like if they were holding the person, like on the arm or some other area of the body, they've been able to collect DNA from that other person.
That's incredible.
So, I mean, those are some tools that can be used today.
They weren't available in 2015, but they're available today.
If the evidence is still available.
Yeah.
In the case of the skin, of course, he's not here anymore. But in the case of the clothes, if they still have the clothes, they can look for DNA from other individuals that might have been in contact with him at that time, especially if it was some type of struggle.
Okay. And that type of evidence after an autopsy, after the body has been through the process at the funeral home and it's gone through burial, would that evidence be available through collecting through the MBAC if a body was exhumed? Do you know that if that was covered in the conference?
No. That was not covered. I don't think so. I mean,
it's just a question. That's out of my own curiosity.
No, I mean, if after a certain amount of time, I mean, what you will find there are just skeletal remains, like bones. So there won't be any.
Well, after a certain amount of time, yeah, there would be nothing but bones.
It won't be anything else. But what they can certainly look at, it's the injuries.
Yes.
And,
Yes. So do you think this?
Pathology can look at the injuries again if they exhume the body.
Mm-hmm. And Bertha being our forensic anthropologist, she would know exactly that process.
Yes.
That we'll cover that on another episode because that is fascinating as well. So as pertains to the crime scene, Stephen, the car, is there any other evidence at the time at the crime scene that they could have collected?
No, as far as I can think now, I don't think, I mean,
other than what we talked about.
I think that the documentation, yeah, no, I don't think that anything else.
Okay.
That could have been collected at that time there.
And we talked about the autopsy. We've seen the report. We won't go too far into that simply because we don't have all of the information, but there is, as you said, certain processes in the autopsy, taking the photographs as is, taking the photographs with scale for sizing, for measurements. We would have to hope that was done.
Yeah, hopefully that was done.
As far as Stephen's clothing, a lot on Reddit and comments on the YouTube videos make reference to the metallic blue paint chips that were found.
Yes.
Can you explain the process in which they were looked at?
The analysis that they did?
Yes.
Well, I'm not like
no, just what it says in the report.
Evidence analysis, but according to the report, they actually searched for those. They searched the clothes. They didn't find anything at the beginning, but then there's one section of the report where it says that they collect some debris from those three evidence or pieces of evidence, which were the shirt, the shorts,
and his shoes.
And from that debris, they actually found paint chips. Okay, but according to the report, where it says, actually, I have it here, and it says, well, they were analyzed with some technique, like analytical technique. One is the micro FTIR, which is a method that uses infrared light and a microscope. It's a non-destructive method, so they can look at the evidence without consuming the evidence or destroying, so it can be analyzed later on with any other method.
Exactly.
And they also use an electron microscope. It's called a scanning electron microscope with an X-ray detector. So basically, with those two methods, they are able to determine the chemical composition, okay, of the sample or the material that they're analyzing. Okay?
And that chemical composition is so important because that would be the use for the match.
Yeah, they can determine the molecular composition of the material, and also with the scanning electron microscope, they can look at the elemental composition, like the chemical elemental composition, and even the concentration of those elements. Okay.
Okay.
On that material.
So and what did they?
Comparison later on. So they did. They used those two methods, and what they said, it's on the results. It says that there was not, because of the condition of the sample, they were not able to identify like the make, the model, or year information of the vehicle. I think there was from a vehicle, but that those sample could be compared later on if a standard becomes available. So,
and there was also other things that paint could have come from, according to the report.
Well, according to the report of the analyst and from the lab, none of that is mentioned there. I think that was a verbal communication between the forensic scientist and one of the law enforcement officers.
And
he mentioned law enforcement officer mentioned in the report that the analyst said that those paint chips can be from either an industrial tool, I think a dumpster, I think a sign too,
Yeah,
a
a street.
sign,
Yeah.
or from a Toyota vehicle that were manufactured in a specific year. I don't remember the year. I think it was
Okay.
something.
And from what we understand from the autopsy report, yes, these paint chips were found on his clothing, but his clothing only. It does not state anywhere that these paint chips, these metallic blue paint chips, were found in, on, or around any of his injuries.
No, this, according to the report from the forensic scientist, like from the lab, he said that they were collected from, or they were found in debris collected from those three pieces of evidence.
Which is his shirt, his shorts, and his shoes.
However, it doesn't state how they collect that evidence. It doesn't state or doesn't say uh, where, from what location in those pieces of evidence those paint chips were found. Were they on the back of the shirt, or the front, or the side? Were only found from the pants? I don't know if they. I don't even know how they collected.
Okay. But they're not, it wasn't mentioned anywhere that those paint chips were actually found in, on, or around any of Stephen's head trauma.
No. What the report says, it's from the clothes.
Okay. So it would lead at least me, and I am not a pathologist, but it would lead me to believe that those paint chips could possibly have been transferred onto Stephen's somewhere on his shirt, shorts, or shoes at any point.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know, and especially knowing that, not knowing where they were located.
It's hard to tell. Yeah,
from the bottom of the shoe, like from the sole of the shoes. Maybe
he could have walked somewhere where there was metallic blue paint chips.
where those paint chips were located. So we don't know if it's a first transfer there,
Yes.
a secondary transfer, or so it
And
does have something to do with the incident itself.
But one would think if there was metallic blue paint chips that were from a car or from something else, let's just say one of the viewers questioned if it was from a bat. But if it transferred onto his clothing and the bat is actually what caused the injury, one would think if that in fact happened, that there would have been metallic blue paint chips in, on, or around somewhere in the wounds in to Stephen Smith.
You mean on the head where
yes.
the are? Yeah, I mean the bat. They could also have beaten him with the bat in other areas of the body where he had clothes on it.
But then he would have had a bruise or a mark from getting hit by a bat, but he didn't.
Yes, he will have those.
So
yeah, I don't think that he had any.
Yeah, so if he had, let's say, for example, the paint chips were on his chest, and therefore he could have possibly been hit in the chest with a bat. There would have been trauma, visible trauma that he had gotten hit in the chest with a bat. And this is, of course, just an example, but this is what I'm trying to say. Even though the paint chips were on his clothing and on his shoes, they were not anywhere, at least according to the report, anywhere near his actual injuries.
No, I mean, that has not been reported.
Exactly. So a few people had sent in questions about that. And the fact is, according to the report and according to the autopsy report, that those paint chips were not, they didn't transfer.
Yeah, and
from, if you do a massive blow to the head, one would think that if the metallic paint chips are going to go all over shirt, shorts, and shoes, it would also be on impact.
Yeah, I would think so, but
it's just their opinion.
I think Bertha consulted.
Yeah, and I have Bertha's response here. She talked with baseball experts, and they said if a metal bat was used, the paint would not chip off. Mm-hmm. If a wooden bat, possibly, but however, Wooden bats are not normally used during tournaments because it was suggested that there was a tournament that night and maybe these boys took a bat. Mm-hmm. Again, this is just theory, but if it was a metal bat, according to baseball experts, the metallic paint chips would not have come from a metal bat. And in the tournaments that were being played, the wooden bats where the paint chips could have come from were not used. So there's some different questions that have come in, and we're just trying to do our best to provide some type of answer to you. Again, we're not experts in that area. We're just trying to provide the knowledge that we have and share that with you.
Yeah, and until actually those paint chips are compared with some reference, we don't know where they're coming from.
Yes. And because they're not on his injuries and not necessarily even collected or found around him, those metallic blue paint chips, it is a possibility that transferred onto Stephen at another time at another place.
Or maybe from the road itself. Maybe they were found, I don't know, on the back part of his shirt, his
yes,
pants and his shoes, and maybe from him laying down there and those were there. We don't know if they were all concentrated in an area.
Yes.
Or if they were like dispersed on
yes,
on his clothes and his shoes. We don't really know. So they might have been transferred maybe from the.
Okay. Okay.
Not necessarily because something.
Is there any other evidence that you think could have been collected?
Well, I think there is a person that gave that was interviewed that he said that he was in a relationship with Stephen, and he said that he was in contact with him that night by texting or even I think he said calling him or texting him. And I believe that his phone was never collected.
Well, they say they collected that. I know his phone records were subpoenaed. The results of that subpoena and the collection of that evidence has yet to be disclosed. Something like that could prove who Stephen was talking with, at what time he was talking with them, who he sent a text to, who he sent a text message from, and what towers he pinged off of at what time to give an approximate location. There is an incredible amount of evidence that could be obtained through those cell phone records. And we just don't know.
But are you talking about the Stephen's phones or
Stephen's phone or
the other person?
The other person's phone?
Okay. I didn't remember that that they actually examined or forensically examined his phone. Like
you said, saying the other person?
The other person.
No, but that's what I'm saying. If you do, they subpoenaed for the records for Stephen's phone. This other gentleman offered his phone. But what I'm saying is what evidence can be obtained from cell phone records?
Oh, yeah, it can be. It depends what they have access to. Because I think with the Stephen phone, they didn't have the password to get into the phone.
I know they were working with the phone company or Apple or something.
Yeah, to get into that. Even from the SIM card, you can get some information.
Yeah. And one thing that I also, excuse me?
That one is really available there. You don't need the password to get the SIM card and
okay.
Look at the information there. But that will, we will have to maybe talk to a data evidence expert that might give us some information about that. Because there are certain ways that they can get information from those devices.
Yes. And also, I think they possibly, and I say possibly because we have to hope if we didn't have the full file that maybe someone did this, but there's an incredible amount of evidence that can be found on social media. And that type of evidence, it's a subpoena. all social media has it.
Yes.
Agencies can subpoena the social media. You could see what time Stephen may have posted. We knew he was taking selfies of himself in the hot tub that night. Did he post them anywhere? If he did, what time? Was there any data on those photos on different websites and social media that could be obtained? I, for one, do not know and have not read anywhere that they did any collection, the forensics that could be found through his social media and posting and timeline and location.
You know, we don't know anything about that, but I mean, definitely, I could not understand how they didn't collect the other person's phone when that person was in contact or saying that he was in contact
Specifically said,
that night, and he was talking to him and texting him, because that can give you like a time that he was alive.
yes.
So
And if in fact he was talking with this other gentleman at that time, you could also try to locate where this other gentleman was. Was he at the crime scene? Was he not anywhere near him, as he says?
exactly.
So it's also an elimination process. You can eliminate based on location.
Exactly.
But from what I understand, even though it was offered, was never done.
It was never done. Which I mean, that's something that should have been done at that time.
Okay. And tonight we were talking about the forensic evidence, and yes, cell phone, there is forensic evidence on cell phone records. There's forensic sciences go across the board with this case. But tonight, this is what we were talking about, was the actual evidence at the crime scene, on Stephen's clothes, on injuries, blood evidence at the crime scene. At a later episode, we'll go in far more detail on the other evidence that wasn't, or completely missed in the investigation of Stephen Smith. But for tonight, we have gone over the forensic evidence at the crime scene and on Stephen's clothing. And Harlot, I cannot thank you enough for sharing all of your knowledge and your expertise and your opinions with our Forensic Friday viewers. I think you're just a boatload of knowledge, and I truly appreciate you taking the time, because I know you have a class to get to talk to us tonight about the forensic evidence.
No, thank you so much. And I mean, hopefully we will be able to get in contact with some other scientists that are experts in all these fields and can give us
some more details,
some other information and details on what can be obtained from all this type of evidence, and how, and see. I mean, we don't even know what's still available there, what the law enforcement do. So we'll see.
Time will tell.
We'll do our best, and I hope that they do it too.
Me too. Well, thank you, Harlot.
Thank you, and have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.